The biggest impact on the environment has got nothing to do with development. By far the biggest impact on our environment has been our farming practices. And essentially, we in the UK have devolved responsibility for farming and the farming consequences for the last 50 years to Brussels. And now with this shifting away from Europe, we're now grappling with some of the really big issues. And they really are very, very serious.
So what are some of these issues? What are the big issues we're facing?
The big issues I think that we're facing is about the science. The science has been very, very clever, but nowhere near clever enough. So all of our pesticides, for example, you talk to universities like Cranfield University and they will accept the unintended consequences of the family of pesticides that we pour on the land have never been properly explored. And the same can be said for all our increases in fertility of things like nitrates, the impact of nitrates. And let's just explore that for a moment or two. I've been working in a landscape in southern England, this great belt of chalk. If I tell you now that there are places in southern England where we are importing water to dilute the drinking water because the nitrate content now in the drinking water is poisonous. There are places now along the south coast where you can see the nitrates moving out of the aquifers into our rivers, into our estuaries and onto the sea. So if you look at places like Southampton Water, for example, where we've got intertidal zones that are internationally important for migratory birds, covered in slime, covered in algae, because of the nitrates being washed out of the aquifers into the sea. And this is directly impacting internationally important habitats. So the pollution of our seas and our aquifers is just one issue. So if you look at the way we apply nitrates, I'm sorry I haven't got the figures for last year, but for the year before, 2019, we put on 1 million tons of nitrates on farms in England. Half of that gets to the crop. A quarter of it goes into the aquifer or is washed off into our rivers, ditches, rivers, and into the sea. A quarter, and it does depend on humidity levels, goes up as nitrous oxide. Nitrous oxide is 300 times worse than carbon dioxide in terms of a climate change gas. The implications of putting 1 million tons of nitrates on our land means that we are emitting 75 million tons of carbon dioxide just on that one farming operation.
Gosh, it's unbelievable, isn't it?
It's very serious. And then the other issue about nitrates, of course, and again, the chalk landscapes of southern England is a classic example. Nitrates get washed off and into our verges and hedgerows, where the fertility levels are exacerbated, and hence you get things like nettles, docks, thistles, the very aggressive plants, shrouding out, really, removing the diversity of our plant life, which of course is the foundation of our wildlife systems. So this increase in fertility in certain places, particularly in marginal land, is also having a very serious impact upon biodiversity as well. Our pesticides, the story of glyphosate, I remember when they launched glyphosate, and I remember the chap standing on television saying, "I'm prepared to drink this." Actually, he didn't do it in front of the camera. But it wasn't 2 years after the research was done that we established if you get glyphosate anywhere near water, it'll kill all amphibians dead. Frogs, toads, newts, absolutely devastating on our amphibians. And now, of course, there's a lot of research going on, and we should have predicted this as landscape scientists. We should have predicted it. It's not directly affect the honeybee, but what it is doing is destroying the gut flora notice the words, to our invertebrates, which is, of course, meaning that their immune system is broken down. So indirectly, it has this devastating impact upon our invertebrates. So not only does it kill all the food plants, it's also now directly affecting the gut flora of our invertebrates, and therefore has a direct and indirect effect upon our invertebrates. And of course, our invertebrate populations have absolutely crashed in the last 40 years.
Indeed. I mean, I remember, well, I'm from the same area as you. I'm originally from Hampshire, grew up around there, lived in the New Forest for a bit, lived on the edge of Surrey, I know that area very, very well. And I remember as a child, there being bees and insects everywhere. And I go back now and there just isn't. There just isn't as many creatures as there were when I was little, which is shocking because it's still very rural, a lot of the areas I lived in. It's really, really worrying. But also, you gave me a really interesting example last time we spoke about just how far the reach of some of these chemicals goes.
Yeah.
And one of the examples was Antarctica, wasn't it?
That's right.
With DDT.
Yes, well, there you are. DDT now found in the skins of the emperor penguin in the Antarctic. I mean, it's absolutely devastating. I think there's a lot of alarm about plastics in the sea. Actually, the next catastrophe is going to be all about the chemicals in our aquifers, in our seas, on our land. We really need to fully understand the impacts of these. We can no longer tolerate the unintended consequences because they are having a devastating impact on the health of our natural capital. So we must welcome Dieter Helm's work on pressing the government to understand that the elements of life, that's my interpretation of natural capital. In other words, clean air, clean water, not just water for us humans to drink, but for life itself,